Okay, so now I'm going to turn it over to Melissa Bowman. Melissa is the one person I always watch for on Twitter to see what's happening in Waterloo Region. She's a very avid reporter on her own in terms of what's happening in the community, and her Citified, I think, is an excellent platform that she uses to get information out into the community. And she's an impartial, fair raconteur of what's going on in the community. And we always have great coffees together. So Melissa, thank you very much for being here this evening. I appreciate it. And I'll turn it over to you now.
Perfect. Thanks, Rob. And I'm just going to try to share my screen. Hopefully that is working for folks. So I'll just jump right into it. We know that voter turnout has been declining, and voter turnout in last year's municipal election was disappointingly low. That's concerning because ideally our elected officials would reflect the desires of our larger community. When so few people vote or participate in public engagement opportunities or council meetings and the like, decisions can be made that are not representative of our community's vision for the city. Let me actually put this in slide mode so you can see it better. Maybe, there we go. So author Jerusalem Demsas states that because participation in local politics, even at the ballot box, is extremely limited, elected officials are often swayed by just a handful of emails or phone calls in opposition to, for instance, a new apartment tower. Additionally, when people do take the time to engage with the city, it's often to express their concerns about an issue. And while it's important that we have a process that allows for this, it can cause politicians to believe that opposition to an issue is the dominant perspective when it very much may not be. Again, Jerusalem Demsas notes that a measly 14.6% of people who showed up to public consultations were in favor of the relevant projects. As local media reacted to the low voter turnout last October, former regional councillor Tom Galloway said that one of the challenges with our local elections, and we were kind of touching on this with Matt's conversation, is that they can be complex and that individual voters must do a lot of the work themselves to figure out whom to support, since there are no political parties at the municipal level. In Waterloo Region, we have tiers, wards, municipalities, townships, school boards. So it can be challenging to figure it all out. I mean, just look at this slide here. We're chatting about it already, but there's a bit of a visual to show you what voters are expected to figure out. And I think Matt made a joke about taking, a crib sheet, like a cheat sheet in. And I honestly tell people like that's something to consider, because that's a lot of names to remember. And if you're not following things closely, you can get names mixed up or forget somebody, or you heard about somebody in the news, but it might not be for the reason you wanted it to be. And so it's a lot to figure out for sure. So, I guess one of the questions is there a way to make it easier for voters to figure all of this out? And so author Dave Meslin thinks so. And last fall, he decided he wanted to do something about that. In his writing of Grey Highlands, Meslin created the Grey Highlands Municipal League with the goal of increasing voter turnout by 50% with a budget of $1 per voter. In his municipality, that worked out to a budget of approximately $10,000, which was spent on creative advertising to attract candidates, as well as print full color candidate menus for every resident, which you can see here. It was actually a two-sided piece, but here's just the front side of it. And while many consider low voter turnout as inevitable, especially at the municipal level, Dave Meslin saw that as an opportunity. He said, "We have this great opportunity with municipal elections. Let's show people that it can be done differently and that it can be done better." The Grey Highlands Municipal League's website states that their job posting leaflet, which you can see here, helped the Grey Highlands area break records for candidate recruitment, while the rest of the province saw record lows. And Dave Meslin isn't new to the local democracy game either. He's the author of several spacing articles and a book on the topic called Tear Down: Rebuilding Democracy from the Ground Up. In his TED Talk, Meslin challenges the idea that apathy is the cause of low voter turnout. Instead, he identifies 7 barriers that keep us from taking part in our communities, even when we truly care. Meslin concludes that we must redefine apathy, not as some kind of internal syndrome, but as a complex web of cultural barriers that reinforces disengagement. So after Meslin's experiment in Grey Highlands, he concluded, if you want to boost turnout on election day, it has to be a 4-year process. You have to create voter engagement for the entire council term. And Meslin had some thoughts on what this could look like. He says you have to get people paying attention to the budget process every year, which is happening right now, if people aren't aware. Although I was taking a look at people who are joining this panel, and I'm assuming most people here already are well aware that budget discussions are happening municipally. We need to make sure that people feel involved and engaged in how their money is being spent. The Grey Highlands Municipal League mailed out colorful brochures and leaflets for the election. And Meslin thinks that there'd be a lot of value in having a group like theirs in creating fun educational materials between elections. And they're also considering hosting events and policy debates. So I guess the big question is, was it a success? Grey Highlands saw an increase in candidates running, which is a good thing. However, come election day, voter turnout was nowhere near where Dave Meslin had hoped. He concluded, I spent $10,000 doing outreach on this election. I think that's the municipality's job, and it should probably be at least twice that amount, which is still only $2 per voter. If you're not spending $2 per voter in an election year to help people be informed about the election, I kind of think you're not doing your job. So where does that leave us exactly? I think there are some great takeaways from Meslin's experience with the Municipal League. There's also other examples that we may want to incorporate or expand upon. For example, some have wondered about the possibility of municipal political parties. Now, it's not an idea that I currently support, but one of the most common questions I was asked at the door when I campaigned in 2018 was, which party are you with? And we have political parties at both the provincial and federal level. So I can totally understand why people assume that that's also the case for municipal politics. One concern with political parties at the municipal level is that they may simply just bog down the day-to-day decisions that need to be made at the local level, which reminded me of a quote which is attributed to Fiorello LaGuardia, that there is no Republican or Democratic way of taking out the garbage. While it's an American reference, I appreciate its point. Both Guelph and Kitchener collected feedback from residents after this past election. They asked questions about whether you voted, how you received information about the election, and if you voted, what was your experience like? So going back to Meslin's point that low voter turnout may be less about apathy and more about barriers, this approach seems valuable. Of course, my biggest concern with this approach is that I suspect most of the people willing to do this survey are likely to be the same people who voted in the election, which is probably very similar tonight. I'm guessing most of the people who are attending the discussion on low voter turnout probably voted in the municipal election. So I do think that feedback is helpful, but we also really need to hear from those who did not vote. Ranked ballots have often been suggested as one way to increase voter turnout. London was the first municipality in Canada to use ranked choice voting in 2018. However, in November 2020, the province enacted Bill 218, which removed the option of ranked ballot elections for Ontario municipalities, meaning that London and any other municipality hoping to offer ranked ballots instead had to use traditional first past the post system. So I think there are some great examples of small things that we can do to remove existing barriers and to encourage more people to engage with local issues. But I also believe that we need to not simply focus on the issue only at election time, but in the 4 years in between, which is why I'm thankful for opportunities such as tonight's virtual town hall. I'll conclude once again by referencing Jerusalem Demsas, who says, democracy is at its best when the views and needs of the people are accurately transmitted to the representatives act, and voters express their approval or disapproval in the next election. Thanks.
Thanks, Melissa, for those comments. Much appreciated and very informative. It is interesting. I remember thinking when the decision was being made to remove the sign from regional property, And I'd always been I've been a proponent of signs. There's arguments all over the place about that, but certainly I always felt it helped incumbents, because if you're a new person, when I ran for mayor back in 2010, my name was not well known in many parts of the township, and in order to get that out there, signs were probably the best way for me to let people know that I was running. I appreciate the cost, but the alternatives are just as costly, whether it's billboards, television, radio, all these other forms are expensive. But you raise an interesting point. Maybe just touch on, if we're going to eliminate signs, and I remember the reason for eliminating the signs was because there was a cost to bylaw to go and investigate sign infractions or deal with sign infractions. Certainly maybe that money that we were spending there and more could have been spent on promoting the election and the fact there was an election. I just didn't feel that was happening very well within Waterloo region. What was your impression about any work by the municipalities to promote the election?
Yeah, so I mean, as somebody who ran in 2018, I think there's a non-financial cost in addition to the financial cost of having signs. Like the amount of time that we spent on just like ordering signs, making signs, figuring out where signs are going, picking up signs, like it took a lot of time. So there is a financial cost, but there's also this non-financial cost that doesn't get spoken about as much. That being said, I would love to see just general signs from the municipality highlighting some details where people can find more information, very much like some of the stuff that Dave Meslin was referencing, so people can be aware. I mean, Matt shared some of the challenges in getting the word out that the election is coming. Again, probably most of the people here, like me, are well aware months, if not years in advance of the upcoming election, but that's not the reality for most people. So I think municipalities investing well in some of this is important. And I'll just give a shout out to waterlooregionvotes.org. Hopefully I have that address right. Was such a good resource for me when I was writing about citified issues and that type of thing, and just a great resource for anybody who is wanting to find information. And that is citizens making that happen. To be honest, if I was with the municipality, I would feel a little bit of shame that they were not coming anywhere close as a good resource in that way. There were attempts, but I think we need to do a lot better.
Yeah, and you mentioned a good resource. I guess the question then is, how are they being made aware of the resource that's available? Someone like you who's savvy on municipal politics generally, but to the average person, how are they being made aware of getting access to it? Because certainly the internet, we used to say, well, seniors are having trouble getting on the computers, et cetera. But, as time goes on, that's less of an argument. My dad's on WhatsApp all the time. He's 86. But I mean, there's lots of people that are becoming more savvy these days. So yeah, thanks a lot. And you mentioned ranked ballot, and that's something we'll talk about in future, at a future town hall for sure. I think that's
awesome.